The story continues in 2012 after the failure of the White Lily and Black Rose project, with yet more relics being found. But unlike the relics before, what was found was city ruins from the unknown civilization underneath an Antarctic ice cap and is currently the largest known relic to date. This city was uninspiredly named Hollow City. Excavation and research soon began on Hollow City in 2023, with a group of scientists being backed by financial support from the civilian sector, with the team of scientists being led by a Professor Jonas and Professor Li D. Ming. Due to the layout of Hollow City, the researchers there didn't need to worry about elid infection spreading to others in different sectors. In addition, the personnel excavating all had been genetically modified to resist elid. In the 10 years after the discovery of Hollow City, Professor Li D. Ming constructed a reverse barrier and designed a city within Hollow City. The 1,217-meter tall Great Multi-Layered Reverse Relic Gate was constructed under his guidance and was a marvel that only the residents of Hollow City could behold. The story then moves back to Beilan Island in 2030, 7 years after the discovery of Hollow City, to the first Beilan Island incident. Though it wasn't the first time there was a failure to properly manage the danger of handling relics, its failure led to a fundamental change in the world order. The prelude to the first Beilan Island incident happened 1 year prior in 2029, when the relic site was breached and elid infections began occurring in Shanghai. The regional government briefly locked down and quarantined the island from the rest of the city, with the lockdown gradually being lowered 15 months after the breach. This lowering of the lockdown would later prove to be a fatal mistake. Then, on the 17th of January 2030, the first Beilan Island incident began to unfold. The incident was precipitated by 7 middle schoolers barging into the lockdown zone, who were then subsequently attacked by elid infectees. The SCAPF, Special Circumstances Armed Police Force, deployed a 4-man task force equipped with assault artillery AA-03D units to rescue the 7 students, with the rescue mission failing and all students and personnel falling victim to the infectees. The final footage from the AA-03D's external cameras showed the chaos from the interior of the relic site, with the task force members failing to block off the entrance by using explosives. This explosion caused the outer walls to collapse and explodes collapse fluid. Briefly explaining what collapse fluid is, it is a particle wave that is used to disrupt the attractive and repulsive states of particles, which expands in the matter to be compressed, stopping its spread once quantum stability has been achieved. Collapse radiation, which comes from collapse fluid, emits bottom quarks and photons when permeating matter, which in turn makes collapse fluid harmful to the human body, and may cause the contraction of elid from the radiation. Collapse fluid also heats up when under heavy pressure, leading to an explosion once the temperature reaches a certain threshold, and may only be countered by evaporating it with molten plutonium. Continuing on, the intercompression of a large quantity of collapse fluid led to extremely high particle densities and a sudden spike in temperature, which caused a massive explosion that spread a cloud of collapse fluid that destroyed the city of Shanghai. The collapse fluid particles were vented further up into the troposphere, where they began to spread around the globe, with regions that were enveloped becoming utterly devastated and rife with elid infectees. Research conducted on collapse fluid clouds found that it would take 100,000 years for the clouds to be tolerable to humans. The inhabitable areas for humans slowly began decreasing, which increased tensions between nations. Later that same year, on the 3rd of March, the Second Korean War started due to the dispersal of collapse fluid, which the North Koreans took advantage of as a means of invasion. Later still, on the 24th of May, most of Japan became uninhabitable due to the collapse fluid spread, with the main safe zone from the fluid, the Tokyo Protected Zone, and its inhabitants being abandoned by the Japanese government due to the cost of keeping the area secure being too great. Finally, in December of 2030, a 2,300-kilometer border wall stretching from Port Arthur, Texas to Winnipeg, Manitoba, which prevented any infected from the North American West Coast from reaching the safe zones on the East Coast, was constructed. 2031 is the year that one of the main antagonists of Girls Frontline appears, Sangvis Ferri Manufacturing. Sangvis Ferri began as a military hardware company founded in Romania. More backstory will be expanded upon as the timeline progresses. A year later, in 2032, after a short civil war and a resurgence of Bolsheviks, another new faction appeared, the new Soviet Union. In the wake of the Beilan Island incident, the government and oligarchs of the Russian Federation were aimlessly trying to figure out how to handle cleanup work from the incident. A former KGB officer from the 16th Directorate, Mikhail Sivagun, handed only partial usable data to the government about the effects of relics and how to properly shield oneself from its harmful effects. Mikhail did hand over a more complete set of data to the future head of the new Soviet Union's cabinet, Viktor Zelinsky, an at the time university student studying mathematics at Poznan University. During the time of the Russian Federation's confusion, the new Soviet communists had begun using the internet to motivate the population into helping themselves, even going as so far to supplant or annex the Federal Ministry of Emergency Situations and take charge of disaster relief functions. After the relief was finished, the Russian Federation attempted to put pressure onto the Neo-Soviets in an attempt to quell the rebellion before it started, but the revolution had already begun. With the support of Mikhail, Zelinsky was able to overcome the power of the Russian Federation, winning the brief civil war and establishing the new Soviet Union on the corpse of the Russian Federation. 2033 marks one of the most eventful and relevant years in the backstory of Girls Frontline. Beginning with one of the smaller events, Hollow City had become inhabitable, but more importantly, the first models of the predecessors to T-dolls had been produced, autonomous dolls. These dolls were similar to humans and possessed extremely high artificial intelligence and operational capabilities, proving to be helpful in everyday life and combat support roles, but it would take another 5 years before the technology reaches its maturity. But the dolls still needed to independently complete complex orders. The most important event of 2033 was the suicide of the former UNRA director Raeder Rossartre, after he publicly released his report on the internal situation regarding the collapsed fluid contamination. Rossartre's actions heavily influenced the events and reactions to the Beilan Island incident and its fallout up until his suicide. Rossartre believed that the size of the Beilan Island incident would force both the North and South Koreas to cooperate, but the North Koreans still invaded, possibly prompted by the United States preventing North Koreans from crossing the 38th parallel. He was then put in charge of the Tokyo Protected Zone project, where he pushed for the transferring of some of the population to the northernmost island of Japan, Hokkaido, where the Japanese government was now headquartered. The local population wasn't happy with the influx of survivors and resisted, making the situation more difficult for the project and the United States military trying to keep its foothold in the region. Later on the 23rd of May 2030, the Cabinet of Japan and the United States Pacific Command, USPA-COM, made a joint declaration announcing the end of survivor transfers to Hokkaido, ordering the UNRA members out of Tokyo and all communications to be cut with the city, leaving the city to fend for itself. Rossartre later returned when the UNRA learned about Kawasaki Kazusa, a girl in Nagoya located by the Japanese Self-Defense Force, JSDF, that showed immunity to ELID. Rossartre led a team of volunteers to try and find her so that a cure may be developed. But when they arrived, a group of religious zealots began to riot in the local safe zone to try and kill Kawasaki, and had driven the JSDF force away. Using his knowledge of the Russian submarine satellite network, Rossartre contacted Mikhail Sivagun to organize the evacuation of Kawasaki, when, on the 19th of June 2030, they were both attacked on their way to Niigata due to Tokyo factions attacking Camp Mishuku to seize Kawasaki, where she died from a stray bullet during their escape. When Rossartre arrived in Russia, Sivagun essentially betrayed him by seizing Kawasaki's corpse, copying all of Rossartre's notes and forcing him to tell insider knowledge of the Chinese, Korean, and Japanese situations before sending Rossartre back to the UNRA offices in London. As 2030 progressed, Rossartre's prediction that the west coast of North America would become contaminated became true. Private companies created new contaminated areas further into the continent by capturing and studying the collapsed fluid without any precaution, and the UNRA put the American West Coast re-evacuation plan into motion. Rossartre was opposed to the North American Exclusion Wall, but this led to the UNRA withdrawing from the re-evacuation plan and Rossartre returning to London, where he found that 2 million refugees from Asia and the Middle East died over the winter as the governments distrusted them. As mankind slowly died around the globe, 2 UNRA projects on what to do about the situation came to the forefront: Project Prometheus and Project Beacon. Project Prometheus, first drafted in 2030 after the disaster in Tokyo, was a long-term plan to assist mankind in its fall and renaissance, with Project Beacon, submitted in February 2031, planning to let mankind crash and burn while securing a select portion of quote-unquote worthy individuals, including UNRA members, inside Hollow City Relic in Antarctica, where they would survive and evolve independently before reconquering the world after its fall. Rossartre thought that Project Beacon was proof that the UNRA had abandoned all hope it embodied and the agency had become cowardly. Rossartre's response was writing the Beilan Island Incident Investigation Report, where he described the theory of the Dark Age he formulated during his experience in the aftermath of the Beilan Island incident, claiming that human civilization had missed its chance to maintain world order and that the globalized effect of the incident would lead to all nations choosing conflict with each other for the sake of their own interests. In other words, World War III. If mankind survived, he believed that the human race would only be saved by forming a global government to foster greater cooperation, with Rossartre concluding that his hope that the report would, quote, light the ember that will become the fire in which human civilization will be reborn. On the 15th of January 2033, Rossartre made his sources in the report public before killing himself at his desk at the Rossartre Manor near Philadelphia. His body was found by FBI agents with a bullet to the head being the cause of death. Officially, Rossartre had died in hospital of the University of Pennsylvania due to internal organ failure caused by long exposure to contamination. The report was presented by the UNRA to the 2033 UN General Assembly, where they passed Resolution GA 21135, which sparked relic activism and eventually led to the expulsion of the UNRA from New York. Rossartre was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his actions. After their eviction from New York, the new chief director of the UNRA, Thomas Huxley, held a vote in the JFK International Airport among the remaining staff to determine what project the UNRA would support: Project Prometheus or Beacon, the latter which won with a majority. This caused 2 factions to be created under the banner of the UNRA. The Rossartists, supporting Project Prometheus by recruiting allies in key government positions around the world, and the Beaconists, supporting Project Beacon from Antarctica. The Rossartists and the Beaconists didn't like each other, with the Rossartists calling the Beaconists traitors to the cause of Rossartre and the UNRA, due to the Beaconists fleeing to Antarctica to become, quote, power-hungry elitists embracing mankind's evils and abandoning their responsibilities towards mankind for their own safety. The Beaconists perceived their abandonment of the UNRA as mankind surrendering its right to survive, and that the greater good would be preserved even if Project Beacon saved people that didn't have mankind's best interests in mind. Despite being the leader of the Beaconists, Huxley was still loyal to Rossartre, and secretly helped the Rossartists by giving them access to English intelligence apparatus channels through his high position in English society. The Rossartists supported the new Soviet Union, as they believed it to be a sign of the resilience of the Russian people, with the Council electing to back the Siberian Lifeline program, a project that aimed at restoring the Siberian Railway and nearby industrial facilities using robots. Using robots would not only enable 24-hour work cycles, but most importantly allow facilities in yellow zones to function, as humans could not live in these partially contaminated areas. To help influence the direction of the program, the Rossartists enlisted the help of Civigun, as he was cautious towards relic technology, which made the Rossartists consider the new Soviet Union as the prime candidate as the sole survivor of World War III. Other key figures to this project and important figures to the story of Girls Frontline were Javier Welkin, leader of the Universal Labor Project at LBT General Manufacturing, Carter Neustadt, the head of International Service for Military Technical Cooperation, and Persica, also known as Persica, a leading researcher in the field of automation, though the Council did not recruit them directly. The Rossartists started their evacuation plan of Northern and Central Europe in order to preserve key figures from the impending Northern Lights incident that would contaminate these regions in 2035. Moving from Finland to Russia was a young Lycoris, future T-Doll researcher for Sangvis Ferri, with the Beaconist starting to send invitations to key scientific and societal figures to move to Antarctica as soon as 2036. With the last batch of seeds from the Svalbard Global Seed Vault being transferred to Antarctica in December 2041, officially marking the full movement of the UNRA from Geneva to the Hollow City. Next year in 2035, as the Rossartist predicted, the Northern Lights incident occurs, displacing most of the residents in Scandinavia, eastern, and central parts of Europe. The collapsed fluid was brought in by seasonal winds and ocean currents, which turned the Baltic Sea and Central Europe regions into contaminated zones. Though those areas were evacuated, millions of people displayed ELID symptoms in the wake of exposure to the collapsed fluid and lost their lives, with the German government also relocating to Frankfurt, where they immediately began working on receiving refugees from North and Central regions. This influx of refugees didn't make the southern Germans happy, where they protested and were then pacified by the government. Because there was limited space in Europe, the European Union, EU, began discussing the division of non-contaminated areas in Africa, sparking neo-colonialism and a rush of colonization and coups to gain more land for the European peoples. The same year, Important Operations Prototype Manufacturing Company, I.O.P, was founded in Ukraine as part of the International Service for Military Technical Cooperation between the new Soviet Union and the European Union. I.O.P came to be after the Pan-European Alliance asked Schiphol Advanced Technology Company and Westchester United Electronics Manufacturing Company to unite their development efforts in creating versatile combat dolls that were able to replace human soldiers. Taking 3 years to plan the official founding of I.O.P, Welkin took this time to find partners to solve technical challenges of advanced doll systems and to raise the interest in civilian and security markets. Welkin registered 3 subsidiaries in the United States, China, and Ukraine to find partners, with the Ukraine branch entering a partnership with Sangvis Ferri, who invested money into I.O.P to provide for AI researchers. Taking a small 6-year jump to 2041, the first common strength doll model, 03H, was developed by the Schiphol Advanced Technology Company. The dolls developed by Schiphol were requested by the Pan-European Military Alliance to develop an interlinked autonomous operating system, which was to provide automated operating functionality to the assault artillery platform. The 03H doll platform had an increased load capacity, which were fitted with force sensors at crucial joints, which allowed for the direct collection of mobility and subjected force data in order to facilitate the Army's tests. These sensor systems were used in succeeding generations of dolls, and greatly improved their agility and movement precision. A year later in 2042, Sangvis Ferri finished their development on their Ripper combat dolls. Sangvis Ferri deployed 21st generation Ripper combat dolls into the Ukrainian Civil War in 2042, which were easy targets for the armed militiamen. The Civil War was caused by an economic crisis, which in turn was caused by the Northern Lights incident, and ended with the EU giving eastern Ukraine to the new Soviet Union. The second generation of Rippers learned the lessons of the Ukrainian Civil War. Bulletproof casings didn't stop 7.62 rounds, their slow movements gave the enemy time to aim, and that an effective command system was needed to ensure that the dolls would methodically carry out tactical plans. This was a great challenge for Sangvis Ferri. 1 year later in 2043, Nighty Wish was refounded by Persica and Lycoris to secretly promote the usage of relic technology in modern research. The founding was 3 years in the making, as the Leipzig University of Karl Marx was tasked by the German government to develop an advanced automation framework that would enable multiple robots to make complex decisions and work autonomously as a unit. The project was given to Persica, a then automation postgraduate, who recruited undergraduate AI student Lycoris in the project after he transferred from the Lomonosov State University of Moscow in 2040. The project was extremely difficult, but it gave Lycoris access to special archives containing relic data compiled by the original Nighty Wish, which gave Lycoris the tools to decode the data and led to a breakthrough necessary to achieve the project in 2043. Lycoris shared the newfound potential of confidential relics research with the international scientific community at a time where political instability made research more difficult, and envisioned a secret support network for scientists. Noticing that Persica and himself were assigned to the Automation Department Research Laboratory number 90, and to honor the secret efforts of the original 90 Wish, Lycoris named the group 90 Wish. He also used the password 90WishRockX for their shared server. The same year, I.O.P rolled out its first generation of service dolls, known as Nymphs, which resembled an adult woman in appearance, and also used I.O.P's CSD skeleton, which was based on the 52P frame. The dolls could simulate 12 human expressions and 128 human movements. After it overcame its initial difficulties, the Nymphs immediately received positive feedback from their service industry, as it made up for the lack of a young workforce, and their simple adherence to commands greatly reduced stress and conflicts between them and the clients. But the Nymphs also lacked negative emotions. The United States also successfully invades Canada. As neocolonialism and the influence of both major powers from the Cold War expanded, more civil wars broke out in countries that used to be part of the Eastern Bloc. Germany's civil war began on the 18th of November 2044, with Bundespolizei units of East German origin staging an organized revolt, leading to a security situation in several large cities spiraling out of control. On the 19th of November, units of the Bundeswehr garrisoned in East and North Germany turned traitor. By the 20th, troops who had risen up began attacking units of the Bundespolizei and Spezialeinsatzkommandos (SEK) within East German borders. And on the 23rd of November, as the federal parliament was unable to make an effective decision, the rebel units exterminated all units of the Bundeswehr, Bundespolizei, and SEK within East German borders. The German Social Democratic Party held a press conference at Brandenburg Gate in Germany, declaring the success of the East German armed uprising and their intention to leave the German Federal Republic. On the 24th of November, the EU HQ began discussing the matter of the German domestic situation, and asked the German Federal Republic to quickly and effectively calm their internal disturbances. On the 26th, the Bundeswehr, which remained loyal to the German Federal Republic, marched on the East German regions. After 2 days of fighting, the Bundeswehr approached the Brandenburg region near Berlin. However, this was a trap by the East Germans, who, on November 30th, successfully surrounded a Bundeswehr armored brigade and 2 mechanized infantry brigades, with the Bundeswehr units surrendering to the East Germans on the 31st of November. Due to this failure, the German Federal Republic begged for the rapid response teams from the EU to intervene in their civil war, with the Social Democrats asking the new Soviet Union to send troops to intervene as well. Due to the German Federal Republic breaking the cornerstone of Germany, in which the United States and Soviets had agreed upon in 1983, Soviet intervention in the matter was not without legal basis. The new Soviet Union airdropped troops successfully at Schönefeld Airport in Poland on the 1st of December, allowing them to provide tanks and heavy weapons to the East Germans. Before the EU rapid response teams could enter the fray, the new Soviet Union had already stolen a march on them and sent their troops directly to East Germany. When the rapid response units arrived, they found the barricades prepared by the Soviet army, turning the Civil War into an international power struggle. The German uprising gave the Soviets a motive to enter the EU sphere of influence. The Russians had found a platform from which they could have payback on Brussels for their various actions during the Ukraine incident. The intervention of Soviet troops led to the EU being unable to swiftly resolve the German situation by force, instead leading to the German conflict expanding in scope and becoming more drawn out. Far away on the other side of the Atlantic, the US also entered the German situation slightly later, and the return of the US and the USSR to Europe put world peace in jeopardy. One could say that the German uprising accelerated the intensification of the conflict between East and West Europe and triggered World War III. World War III lasted from the 15th of April 2045 to the 29th of June 2051. The clouds of collapsed fluid particles in the stratosphere meant that many nations lost contact with and control of most of their satellites. Similar disruption led to long-range ballistic missiles being unable to effectively avoid interception, and it was very difficult for them to precisely strike their targets while conducting saturation bombardments. While the missile offensive in the first phase of the war did not cause major damage to various countries of the world, they heightened the overall tension of the situation. After observing saturation launches while the communications had completely failed, the Soviet missile submarines tasked with running silent concluded that a nuclear war had begun and started launching their medium-range nuclear-tipped missiles. The SLBMs were not intercepted, but they eventually lost control due to lack of effective guidance. And while the nuclear warheads which had gone astray did not strike any major cities, they nevertheless created many depopulated and contaminated zones. This situation directly intensified the conflict and led to a full-scale nuclear war. The second phase of the war was fought for stratospheric airspace by various nations. Strategic bombers began carrying cruise missiles with nuclear warheads to break through enemy defenses. In order to protect their own bombers while intercepting their enemy counterparts, the combatant nations fought 3 massive campaigns in the sea and air. After the loss of most of their fleets and fighters, and with many key cities in ruins, the war entered its third phase. Due to the war objective shifting to the seizure of uncontaminated ground-based combat was at its fiercest throughout human history. High technology allowed for high-intensity conflicts which sharply reduced the human population once more, and many uncontaminated and uninfected regions desolated due to the devastation of the war. In the 6th year of the war, after more than 3,000 divisions worth of troops had been wiped off the faces of the earth, the various nations were too weak to launch any further offensives, and so, the United States, new Soviet Union, and the surviving powers stopped fighting and entering talks, with the war finally ending after each side was bound with mutually restrictive conditions. However, hatred and enmity still remained after taking measures such as reducing their domains and moving their heavy industrial regions. The remaining countries licked their wounds amidst the scarred landscape, hoping that time would restore their strength. During World War III, many notable events happened. Just as World War III began, Hollow City announced that it was an independent nation, maintaining a policy of absolute neutrality and sealed all means of entering Hollow City. In 2047, the world's first controlled anti-collapse test reactor pile had been created, with anti-collapse technology being applied to supercomputers, allowing for computation of microscale matter construction templates. To briefly explain anti-collapse technology, we can consider molecular boundaries to be something like a wall. When an external force pushes it down, the bricks are strewn randomly all over the ground, like scattered particles. The operation of anti-collapse technology can be visualized as the scattered bricks flying back up into their original positions. It is the attractive state between particles which causes them to swiftly resume their original forms. In 2047, the Wartime Defense Council of the new Soviet Union and Ministry of Defense ordered Sangvis Ferri and I.O.P. to militarize doll robots due to the war of attrition happening on the Western Front, even with the ministry's distrust of doll soldiers. Sangvis Ferri Manufacturing built on the base of the Ripper to design 2 new types of dolls for assaulting and sniping, codenamed Vespid and Jaeger, respectively. Meanwhile, since I.O.P. had never made forays into developing armed dolls, all they could do was start a new project for the Wartime Defense Council's mission. Starting from the CSD frame, Javier designed a doll robot that could make direct use of ordinary soldier weapons. The CSD platform could fully replicate human motions and, during tests, it could effectively operate and use many forms of personal weapons. In contrast to Sangvis Ferri's approach of specializing the designs, Javier went with the design concept of a single platform with broad applications. In the beginning of June 2047, both companies finished their design proposals and began producing their new armed doll robots. According to the original plans, these doll units would be tested on the front lines for a while before being used in counterattack operations. However, the US military took the initiative and attacked Berlin in August, breaking through the defensive lines there. The Soviet army lacked the forces to stop the hard-driving US armored units, and had no choice but to terminate the gear trials and immediately send them into battle. Blocked by the doll robots, the US military's advance was shattered. The battle also highlighted many problems with doll robots. They needed to be commanded at close range, I.O.P.'s dolls suffered a high incidence of malfunctions, Sangvis Ferri's dolls were not sufficiently agile, and the dolls' AIs for both companies was inadequate and could not adapt to the ever-changing battlefield. As a result, only a few dolls remained after the 8,000 combat dolls were sent into the fray. Despite their many flaws, the performance of the combat dolls still startled the officials of the Ministry of Defense. Many high-ranking officers saw the incredible potential of the doll robots in the military sector. If these doll robots could be improved and further advanced, future battlefields would be much different from today. Apart from the doll robots, legged, wielded, and tracked autonomous robots were also used to a great extent in World War III. Mountain combat units from both sides were outfitted with autonomous mobile mortars, gun howitzers, and troop carriers based on 4- and 6-legged robot designs. These weapons greatly increased the attack power of mountain combat units, and the traditional tactics of hugging the terrain for defense faltered in the face of these new vehicles. During the middle phases of the war, there were many occurrences of robot platforms shooting and even ramming each other. One could call them the new cavalry of the 21st century. In direct combat, autonomously controlled main battle tanks could be organized into company-level armored assault formations under the direction of a single command vehicle. Just a few experienced tank commanders could lead an entire tank regiment in a breakthrough. If it was not for the replenishment of ammunition being outstripped by the rate of depletion, the battlefield would have been soon littered with burnt-out tank hulls like a video game. In the late stages of the war, autonomous combat robots had come a long way from how they had been at the start of the war, when they needed to be remotely controlled or commanded at short range. They'd been developed to the point where they possessed a certain degree of intelligence, and had a semi-smart state where they could devise battle plans of their own volition. During Operation Tradewind in 2050, the new generation of Sangvis Ferri and I.O.P dolls vastly outdid their performance from 3 years ago. In Italy, doll robots could accompany multi-legged robots in climbing hills and launching ferocious attacks on fortifications and mountain ranges. These autonomous robot units speedily broke through the mountain defense lines of southern Italy, and Rome was forced to capitulate just as swiftly. If one were to say that World War I was the world war where technology of the electrical age was applied to the battlefield, then World War III was the first world war where dolls and fully autonomous technology entered the battlefield. In 2049, Mikaj, Javier's research partner, students found some articles shared on the internet by the technological team calling themselves 90wish. Mikaj read through the files and felt that they were quite forward-looking, and so he handed them over to Welkin. After looking through those files, Welkin immediately realized that 90wish had extraordinary technical abilities and developmental drive, and so he immediately began working through various channels to forge relationships with the members of 90wish. However, after the public release of those files, 90wish seemed to have vanished off the face of the earth, and there was no more news to be heard from them. Information obtained from the Russian Internal Internet Security Bureau indicated that 90wish had not reached a consensus about the earlier public discourse of those files, leading to internal divisions within the group and the members viewing each other with hostility. After learning from a friend in the Ministry of Internal Affairs that the lives of 2 former members of 90wish were in danger, he dug deep into his pockets to hire a PMC to protect them. After losing most of their protection detail, the former members of 90wish, Persica and Lyco, were delivered to an I.O.P safehouse. Following some negotiations, Persica and Lyco agreed to work with Welkin. Welkin formed a small company called Hermit under a fake identity in order to ward off prying eyes, and then use various business dealings to have it enter a financial relationship with I.O.P. Hermit provided much advanced technology to I.O.P., and with this technology, I.O.P. finally managed to perfect the performance of the CSD series successing models, which they remodeled into military dolls, which they used to successfully wrest back their military contract from Sangvis Ferri. 3 years after the Third World War, Griffin and Kruger Private Military and Security Consultant Company, G&K, was formed by Bierzevich Kruger, a former member of the new Soviet Army and Ministry of Internal Affairs who also participated in the rescue and escort operation of Persica, and his acquaintance Griffin. Kruger had witnessed many deaths during his military career and wanted to dedicate his retirement to less destructive purposes, founding G&K to protect populations with no government protection. G&K soldiers were human at first, but quickly shifted to using armed civilian T-dolls to spare human lives and money, which was influenced by the Rossartists wanting to promote T-dolls for the paramilitary market. Griffin kept his share of the profits, but relinquished all management decisions to Kruger, trusting that their interests would naturally align. Kruger's reputation would also attract military veterans to command the T-dolls, and his connections would enable him to get early contracts from the Soviet military. G&K developed good relations with T-dolls manufacturer I.O.P. Kruger and I.O.P's director Javier Welkin maintained good personal relations, and Kruger himself took an interest in the development of second-generation T-Dolls. This close partnership let Kruger provide direct data feedback about T-Doll's efficiency to I.O.P's main R&D subcontractor, Hermit. G&K's collaboration was instrumental in further improving T-Dolls and meant that I.O.P was willing to occasionally take back dolls from G&K to return them to the civilian market. G&K was later hired by I.O.P's competitor, Sangvis Ferri, to escort Lycoris to their underground research facilities, after the scientists decided to leave Hermit. Kruger accepted only if SF would share Lycoris' future results with him. G&K's influence as a partner prevented Welkin from seeking retribution against Lycoris. Aside from I.O.P, G&K also benefited from the support of the KCCO's General Carter, a former superior of Kruger who exerted his influence to provide G&K with a better quota of maximum T-Doll employment numbers, smuggle weapons, and organized media blackouts. In exchange, Kruger handed Carter data about Sangvis Ferri T-Dolls, which Carter could use to further his own interests by developing more powerful military androids and secure his place within the new Soviet Union military. A year later in 2054, Persica finalizes her etching theory, a general concept to let two objects form a standalone connection. This is used in her imprint technology, officially called ASST, Advanced Statistics Session Tool, a software that allows the proficiency of a T-Doll to improve with specific weapons and tools based on compiled code, giving the T-Doll an instinctual feel of how to best employ it, with some T-Dolls studying the history of their weapon of choice to feel like they can achieve higher affinity and greater efficiency. Elisa, a future enemy of G&K and high-end AI of Sangvis Ferri, is developed and activated by Lycoris. 2057 brings about Persica founding 16 Lab Research Institute, which allowed her to develop what she called the second generation of T-Dolls, under the investment of I.O.P and Welkin, where she developed the dummy network system, finalizing the imprint technology and the NeuroCloud system. The dummy network system is a special application of the Zener protocol, a wide area communication protocol built by 90wish. Dummy networking is a command network protocol enabling a human command to be received by one doll, who would analyze and relay the command to the rest of the group. A team of dummy dolls functions about 37% more efficiently than a team relying only on Zener protocol connection. The protocol is optimized by separating dolls in mainframes and dummies, with only the mainframes having the processor and synchronization software necessary to compute commands. Dummies are cheaper since they only carry imprint, scouting, and combat software with minimal hardware functions. As a result, the total price of a dummy squad is lower than a squad of standard dolls. One can speculate on what would happen if a mainframe was destroyed before its dummies. Either they would simply collapse when the link is severed, or they could host a backup of the mainframe's neural cloud and could continue to operate at a lower capacity due to inferior specifications. Neural Cloud, sometimes referred to as Digimind, is the AI system serving as the mind of T-Dolls. It can be compared to their operating system. NeuroCloud is a proprietary recording system having the advantage to be transferable to and from a mainframe to protect the T-Doll's memories from being lost if they are destroyed during operations. The T-Doll's memory can then be downloaded into a new body. Regular periods of quote-unquote sleep are necessary for T-Dolls to clear their memory cache, but most standard T-Dolls are not able to dream. There are 3 consciousness levels for a neural cloud. Level 1, or surface consciousness, is the default state of awareness. Level 2 is equivalent to a state of sleep or deep trance, where a T-Doll's body freezes in a position and she stops responding to external stimuli. T-Dolls are taken to this level during maintenance or when performing a level of electronic warfare, EW, where they need to cut control of their body and external sensors to save processing power. A T-Doll can usually enter and leave level 2 at will, but some EW attacks can leave a T-Doll's neural cloud stuck at level 2 until repaired. Level 3 is equivalent to a T-Doll's subconsciousness and is reached during heavy maintenance, when a T-Doll's control on her body is completely severed and she can't wake up without external assistance. The neural cloud is contained in a dedicated module of the T-Doll's body called the neural core. This core processes its own power bank to keep the neural cloud safe for a period of time when it is taken out of the body. Under normal circumstances, extracting the neural core is probably done with specialized tools, but it is also possible to extract it more violently by ripping out the T-doll's body. However, a neural core is a fragile piece of hardware that is easily damaged. It is still possible to recover some data if a neural core has been damaged or ran out of power. 2061 brings the formation of who are essentially the main protagonists of Girls Frontline, AR Team. The team is made up of M4A1, the leader, M16A1, M4 SOP Mod 2, STAR-15, and RO635. The team was created by Persica from 16 Lab and later loaned it to G&K. During the first activation test of M4A1, Persica elected to use the most basic weapon data for imprint, the M4A1 rifle, and subsequently used weapons of the same design family to create a sense of sisterhood in the team. It would take some time for M4A1 to function reliably and be put in command of AR. The same year, the Butterfly incident took place in the main labs of Sangvis Ferri as a result of the failure of Operation Butterfly. Operation Butterfly was led by T-Dolls under the command of the 6th Directorate of the Soviet Bureau of State Security. Further details will be given when Operation Deep Dive is looked at. Finally, we move to the beginning of the main story of Girls Frontline in 2062. G&K desperately needed more personnel to contain Sangvis Ferri after accepting a contract to fight against their dolls after the Butterfly incident, with the commander being hired as a human controller and assigned to the forward base in Sector 9. From there, the story unfolds. Thank you for watching. The next video will be looking into the backstory of Azure Lane, with Arxonite's backstory being after that. The next Girls Frontline video will look at the T-Dolls in numerical order, starting with the Cult Single Action Army.